Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be discussing a little bit more lore. As you're well enough aware, the Changeling is going to be the newest legendary lord for the Tzeentchian monogod faction when Shadows of Change releases. And he's a pretty interesting character, as you can already see from the clips above. He is very different to most other demons that we've seen of Tzeentch. However, he's not entirely unique in a certain sense, as the Changeling, despite his very unique appearance, is a horror. We just don't know exactly what it is, as he may be a blue horror given his coloring, yet nobody really knows his true form, or at least nobody remembers it. What we do know is that the Changeling is immensely powerful even when compared to other demons, as not only is he able to change his form to mirror that to whomever he's fighting, be it a mortal, a dryad spirit, or even another greater demon, but he may also mimic their power, which means their strength, their magical capabilities, even their intelligence too. The Changeling is perhaps one of the strongest demons that we actually know of in Warhammer fantasy lore, and he mostly uses his complex powers to be a trickster more than anything else. He will sow destruction, disharmony, and essentially act within the shadows, yet still in plain sight. A general example could be given that while the Blue Scribes are the most important demons for Tzeentch in terms of his reconstruction, and Kairos Fateweaver representing knowledge granted by Tzeentch, the Changeling represents the ever-changing and confusing aspect of how reality may be shaped and formed. So let's get a little bit more context here. Unfortunately, the Changeling does not have as much lore as, say for example, a called Hellbrass, but we do get a little bit of information, especially when we look towards the 8th edition army book. The Changeling personifies the part of Tzeentch's psyche that is the meddler, the deceiver, the trickster. He can take the form of other beings, from the tiniest of insects to the most massive of greater demons. None, save perhaps Tzeentch himself, know the Changeling's true form, for he goes cowled and cloaked when in his own shape. Perhaps even the Changeling himself has forgotten it. Not only can the Changeling mirror the form of another, he can adopt mannerisms and personalities in so flawless a fashion that even the dark gods can be deceived. In all of creation, there is only one entity that the Changeling cannot duplicate, the great god Tzeentch himself. The Grand Schemer will not suffer any being to steal his identity even for a moment. So before we continue, there is something that we can talk about here. We know that he can take on the personalities and so on, but isn't as flawless as this would suggest. In the most recent lore dump that was released by Creative Assembly and written by David Geimer, we know that even the Changeling needs to keep up the persona, and there are times that he can actually make mistakes, which is why the Cathayan dragon Yuan Bo was able to deduce that he was in fact not talking to his sister Miao Yin, but rather a Changeling. This would have you believe that the Changeling, while still able to take on the personality and so on, would have to do some at least basic research on his target to be able to mirror as much as possible, and even slight mistakes are possible. This is the thing with Tzeentchian magic. It will still go back and hurt even the person that's casting it. It also once again shows that even Tzeentchian demons can have a little bit of trouble when it comes to using Tzeentchian magic, which is stuff that we've heard in the past through little tidbits of lore here and there. Even Tzeentch will look towards his own creations and think, well, now it's time for you to slip up. But let's continue. Afflicted as he is with a low tolerance for boredom, the Changeling exists to play malicious tricks upon all about him. One such occasion taking the shape of a demonette. He stole the silver apples of knowledge from Slaanesh's palace. On the edge of the Dark Prince's territory, he then assumed the form of a plague bearer and slipped into Nurgle's garden, only to grow tired of the game and abandon the apples to rot amidst the decaying fronds. When Slaanesh discovered the theft, he flew into a rage and sent his armies to retrieve the lost treasures. So did Slaanesh and Nurgle come to blows, the former believing the latter to be the thief, and the latter convinced the former had engineered a pretext for invasion. And this is a very interesting point to discuss. You see, the Changeling has such immense power that he can go into the very realms of chaos, into the realms and domains of other deities, and not be caught. Which is very, very curious, because in most cases, we know this for a fact, you would go into the realm of chaos if you found the way in, which would be next to impossible by the way, and already would other forces be alerted of your presence. So the fact that the Changeling can mask himself so efficiently to walk through the realms of chaos in other domains go into sacred places like Slaanesh's Gardens and not be caught is actually very impressive, especially when we have examples such as in Warhammer Fantasy, Oxyotl going into the realms of chaos and always being hunted down constantly, and obviously there's a few cases of that with the 40k setting, for example Caldo Drago and so on. So this is actually showing real strength of power too. But let's continue. The Changeling was already elsewhere, stealing collars of corn from fleshhounds and melting them down to create brass dioramas of the blood god's greatest defeats. So has the Changeling passed through eternity, sowing mischief in his wake. It was he who cut away Slaanesh hair while the Dark Prince slept, and from it wove the cloak that Tzeentch presented to the mortal champion, Egrim Van Horseman. Stopping here a second, obviously there's the link here with Egrim, which makes a lot of sense, but what's really impressive is that the Changeling was not only able to go into the other domains like we've discussed, but get so up close and personal with Slaanesh himself. It's more impressive and confusing than anything else, because the Chaos Gods themselves are supposed to be so extremely powerful. I understand the Tzeentchian demon be able to sneak in unawares, but getting so close as to the physical representation of the god, it sounds like, again, the Changeling is not only so powerful, but extremely powerful at that right. Let's continue. It was the Changeling who sealed the doors of Khorne Citadel while he was away campaigning, forcing the Blood God to shatter his own proud gates when he returned. The Changeling's handiwork is always obvious after the fact. Indeed, part of the prank is to make the victim aware of his deceiver, but impotent to act against him. It is of little surprise, then, that Tzeentch's brother gods burn with desire to destroy the Changeling, to tear him limb from limb, and to scatter his parts and pieces across reality, yet somehow he always evades capture. So this is something which is of course very Tzeentchian, performing some elaborate prank, hoax or plot, and then letting your enemy know it was you, but when it's too late for them to be able to properly act. It's interesting, because something like this, if it happens quite regularly, then you'd expect the Chaos Gods to be more on high alert, perhaps twisting and shaping their demons to be able to, well, you know, seek out any changelings, for example. You'd imagine that Furies would have some sort of ability to do this, and not even that, but the Fleshhounds of Khorne, but it does seem like he can mask himself very, very well. But let's continue once again. Though Tzeentch loves to take credit for the Changeling schemes, only a handful of the demon's adventures are carried out at his patron's direction. The Great Schemer is content to let the Changeling roam wild throughout eternity, causing havoc where he may. Each meddling opens up more possibilities in the great game, and Tzeentch watches with amusement as the Changeling weaves his uneven tapestry of disruption. That so many of his pranks have caused terrible wars is of no concern to the Changeling. He loves the discord of conflict, for it breeds opportunity to deceive and dismay like nothing else. His enjoyment begins even before armies clash, impersonating messengers and generals to disrupt strategy wherever possible. When battle begins, the Changeling is wont to adopt to share the shape and skill of the most powerful foe, pounding the enemy to pieces with malicious enthusiasm and borrowed muscle. So this is actually quite an important thing, because even as he sets two armies to fight against each other, unlike other Tzeentchian demons who will try to stay away from the combat, or at least, you know, fight from afar, the Changeling is all too happy to get up there close and personal, obviously under someone else's form and someone else's strength. The fact that he is not only able but also willing to get up front and personal shows some level of different psychology when it comes to Tzeentchian demons. We also do know that in some cases, the Changeling is not above working on the behest of other Tzeentchian demons, which we find out here in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and it is fairly recent lore, which is actually quite cool. So once in an age, the Changeling might work at the direction of a Lord of Change or some other powerful minion of Tzeentch. This could be a Horror, it could be a Herald, it could even be a Demon Prince, but only when the pranks take its fancy, and the consequences will be truly spectacular. Again, something very, very interesting here, mostly because we hear him being very independent, but here he shows a little bit more willingness to cause some chaos at the behest of someone else, which is cool, right? At the end of the day, he's still a Tzeentchian demon, and he knows that working with other Tzeentchian demons will allow for him to further the great game in the direction of his patron deity. Thus, if Tzeentch gets stronger, the Changeling gets stronger too. And we do have an example of one of the Changeling's little pranks. This is in the year 703 after Sigmar. The Changeling, Trickster of Tzeentch, takes the form of the Lich King Arkan the Black. So disguised, he promises a cabal of Necrarch vampires untold sorceress knowledge in exchange for their assistance in an attack on the Lustrian temple city of Langsla. While zombie hordes fight Langsla's lizardmen protectors to a standstill, the Changeling's demons ransack the treasure's vaults of both sides, swiftly overwhelming defenses weakened by the ongoing battle and claiming many mighty artifacts, which they then devour. What is actually very curious about this is, obviously, vampires can sense the living and the dead. The demons themselves are neither living nor dead, they are metaphysical. So the fact that these vampires, especially the knowledgeable types of vampires, weren't able to deduce that, yes, this was not Arkan the Black, is very, very interesting. His power of masking himself is that strong. And I keep saying this because a lot of people seem to think that the Changeling is just a one-trick pony, and in truth, technically he is, but he does it into such a very strong degree that he is something to be actually feared. He could see empires being destroyed purely because he thought might be a funny situation. Now, it's always been speculated that there might be multiple Changelings across the Warhammer Fantasy world, mostly because he is somewhere and then very soon after he's somewhere else. And a lot of people start to think, yes, there might be multiple Changelings, or it could be that he has split himself into multiple forms. At the end of the day, he's still a very powerful Tzeentchian demon, so it could be that he is in multiple locations at the same time, and he can be that quick. It's why we hear about him in Grand Cafe, replicating, say for example, the Monkey King in multiple areas, but also within the Empire, all the lands of Ulthuan, causing a little bit of havoc every now and then, making some forces fight against each other. One thing is certain, however, wherever the Changeling is, destruction and trickery is easy enough to follow, and anyone that you may be speaking to right now could very much be the Changeling in person. But what do you think about the Changeling as a character? I know a lot of people were expecting a Grim Van Horseman, which, you know, is fair, it's a really cool Chaos Lord, but I feel like the Changeling is pretty interesting in his own right, presenting something very different. We have, of course, seen from Creative Assembly showcases that the character is very unique in terms of playstyle, which obviously is a cool thing to do. We want more unique stuff when it comes to Warhammer, and I really don't think that there would be any other character that would represent Tzeentch's trickery as well as the Changeling. We're going to have to wait and see how he properly plays, however, but I'm fairly excited. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. And with all that being said, have a great day everyone, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.